Good afternoon. My name is Graham Moore, the Councillor for Fulridge and Chairman of Colne Area Committee for this remote meeting. I would welcome everybody again for the second one. Apologies I have from Councillors Fletcher, Greaves, Nixon and Petty. And I think that's all, Lynn, is it? Is that okay?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Does anybody have any declarations of interest for the agenda? Okay. If I move on too quickly, please just start flashing your little hand on and I'll soon pick up on you. I have no indication of public questions, so we'll over that one. The minutes of the last meeting, can I assume that you unanimously approve them? If not, I wait for someone to indicate they're against them. That's the minutes of the last meeting approved. Next item is the progress report. Does anybody wish to comment or have any questions? Okay, item 5, police issues. We're going to defer that to deal before item 7 with Jerry Stanford and item 12, if that is okay. Which then brings me on to planning application 0893, which is Langroyd Hall. Just so you know, the agent, Mr. Burkett, is here to answer questions. He doesn't wish to make a statement. So he is here to answer any of our detailed questions. I have 2 written questions from members of the public that I will ask Lynn to read, and then for Neil, the planning manager, to comment on before we get into anything else, if that's okay. So if you could read those, Lynn, one after the other, and then we can deal with them together.
Okay, the first question is from Gary Dobson. After some discussion at the last meeting regarding the condition of the Langroyd Hall roof and building, can the Planning Committee now confirm that any approval given to this planning application is subject to restoration of the roof before any development commences? The roof slates were removed early March 2019 and a temporary plastic sheeting was used instead. This is in a very poor state and must be allowing water into the building, causing deterioration. It cannot be allowed to go through a second in this state of neglect. So that's the first question. The second question is from Christina Smith. What is the height of the new buildings? Supposedly the blocks C and D have been amended so that some of the roof has been lowered, but from what to what? There are no dimensions on the scale drawings and I do not understand how to work this out on a screen. Does anyone at the council know what the heights are? If blocks C and D have been reduced in height by using flat roofs, why hasn't block E been redesigned accordingly? This is the block that is proposed on my boundary and will be overshadowing and also out of character with the site. Would it be possible to find out what is the intended use of these buildings? I note that the application says Class C3, but what does this actually mean?
Okay, thank you, Lynn. I would now ask Neil Watson to comment on that, if he wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Chairman. The first question relates to the roof of the premises. Chairman, there are 2 issues here. Firstly, we have just won an enforcement appeal to require the roof to be reinstated. So that must be done within, it's about 5.5 months now. It was 6 months from the date of decision. So that is a requirement of that enforcement notice. Chairman, condition 14, if approved, obviously not saying it will be approved, but if approved, condition 14 requires a programme of works to be carried out, which will mean works to the hall itself as first works. May not be the roof first, but it's the completion of the hall and works to the hall as first works. Chairman, the second question, it's an odd one, this, in many ways. People are asking about dimension and heights. Heights and dimensions are clearly shown on the plans. Well, in terms of the plans are scaled and we know the measurements. But Chairman, just pure measurements don't tell you the whole picture, because you have to look at land levels, relationships with other buildings. Some of the buildings are split level, etc. So you've got to look at the different dimensions and where you measure from according to the individual buildings. I have later on got some dimensions, general dimensions that I think people were after, but it's not a simple case of one measurement. There are different heights and relationships between different buildings. Some are split level, etc. So you've got to be careful to make sure you are measuring the right impacts. Chairman, in terms of changes to blocks C and D were changed because of the design and impact on the main hall, and we wanted a better relationship and a better scale and design for those. Block E is not in that category, so that's why we didn't ask for amendments to Block E. What we did do with Block E, and there are plans showing cross sections through there, is specifically look at the impact on neighbours for Block E, which we're recommending are acceptable, particularly with a blank elevation facing those properties. Chairman, if I just go on to some specific measurements, these are from the latest plans and from the original. But as I say, you have to temper this with some of the buildings are split so that there are different heights of different parts of it. But generally speaking, building B is 8 metres high. Building C was originally 9.8 and it has been amended down to 8.2. Building D building C was split anyway, so there are 2 parts that as there are now, so that I'm referring to the highest part in building C. Chairman, building D originally was 7.5 and has come down to 6 metres, and building E has remained constant at 7.9 metres. Chairman, in terms of what Class C3 is, it's defined under the 1987 Town and Country Planning Use Classes Order. Effectively, it means a residential use, so a dwelling as opposed to an institutional use. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. So I've got Councillor Foxley's got his hand up, and I see Councillor Lord is waving. So I'll call Councillor Foxley first, and then yourself, Dorothy. Okay. Councillor Foxley.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to comment on the issue of dimensions versus levels. In principle, I see no reason why levels shouldn't be provided, which would give the relative heights of things rather than just dimensions from ground level. So as Mr. Watson says, heights in themselves don't give us that relationship, but levels would do, and it would be perfectly normal for that to be provided by the applicant. I would have thought so. Yeah, that's my comment there.
Okay.
Chairman, may I interject
Sure.
there, just to be clear? I wasn't saying that levels were not provided, they are. What I was saying is, just me saying it's 7 metres high won't mean a great deal, because if the ground level's lower in that point, then the impact on surrounding buildings. So I wasn't saying floor levels and ground levels aren't provided, because they are.
Okay, understood. Councillor Lord. Yeah, unmute, Dorothy. If you unmute your mic, so it's fine. No, that's it. You're there now. Yeah, you're live now. That's good.
Okay. Just to say that on the site visit, which by the way was quite beneficial for me, I was speaking to the developer, and he said if this application went through, whether it does or it doesn't, the roof will be the first thing that they will tackle. Just to say that. I don't.
Yeah, I see a nod there from Mr. Burkett, so that's fine. I think we've had several people have verbally agreed to that being done as soon as they get the go ahead. Councillor Butterworth, do you wish to speak? You have the hand up on your screen. Neil?
No. I'll take it down.
Just switch it off then for me. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to comment on this? Anybody have a proposal to put forward? If not, I'll put a proposal from the chair. Councillor Foxley.
Well, I was going to say I would propose approval.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Yeah,
Right.
So it's probably some form of internet problem. I see Miss Jerry Stanford's there as well. Good afternoon, welcome. Okay, so I was asking, we've got a proposer and a seconder for that resolution, which is...
Chairman,
Yeah.
just so we're not judicially challenged on this.
Do it again. So do it again.
I think can we just make sure the councillors are all there? If Lynn can look at that, please, and just make sure that there's no ambiguity in voting, so that members can't say, or anyone challenging this can't say there was some impropriety in the process, please.
Absolutely. So let's start again. We'll prevent nothing's been happened. So Councillor Foxley, would you like to put your proposal forward?
Yes, sorry, I'm just checking that I am unmuted. Right, sorry, I think I've turned my camera back on now. All very confusing. Yes, I'd like to propose approval.
Okay. And do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. So it's Councillor Margaret Foxley, a second that. So I will now put that to the vote unless anybody indicates that they wish to put forward an amendment.
Chairman, could we please have a named vote on this so that just in case people have dropped out of the meeting that we're not aware of?
Absolutely. Okay, so did anybody wish to put forward an amendment? If you do, put your hand up. Councillor Coburn-Price?
I would like to propose that it is rejected, although I really appreciate the amended plans. The site visit was so useful for me, and I saw the sight lines were there. For me, it's just the crowding of the site and the parking. I don't know whether anybody would second it. It's just how I feel. It certainly is a load better from how it was before.
Okay, so there's a slight mixed message there, Councillor, but I take your your suggestion. Does anyone wish to second that motion for rejection? I see no indications. Please wave your hands or start talking if you wish to be seconding that rejection. I think that motion has failed, because you can't find a seconder. So we go back to the substantive motion, which has been put forward by Councillor Foxley and Foxley. So all those in favour of the approval of planning application 0893, please indicate.
How do we do that? Because it's both.
Yeah, I voted you being as you were the proposer and the seconder. So I only have one that I can't see, which is Councillor Coburn-Price. Is there any other councillor that has not voted for it? Please speak or indicate. Okay, so the record would show that there was one councillor in attendance at the meeting, Coburn-Price, that did not vote for that. Are we all happy with that? Yeah. I think that's sound. Lynn, are you happy with that?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, councillors. Then we will move on. The next application is 0198, which is down for approval. Anybody wish to speak? Would anybody like to put a proposal on the table?
Sorry, I was turning over paper.
Okay.
This is the one in Trawden, yes?
Yes, single-storey agricultural workers dwelling at Cowfield Farm.
Yes, I would like to speak on this, and I have spoken to Mr. Watson about it. And I've also spoken to my ward councillor colleagues as well. As you can see in the officer's report, Trawden Parish Council are not impressed with this application, and I would just like to make some observations, which are that were this for a permanent application, this would not be acceptable in a conservation area. You know, it is a temporary log cabin building, and it's quite sizable too. So if this was a permanent application within a conservation area, this would not be accepted, I don't think, or acceptable. However, it's not. So we're looking at the business plan, which would be to try to make farming work on 74 acres. Now, this has been looked at in 2018 by an inspector, and a report was written by professional agricultural specialists. And the general feeling within the village, the people that I've spoken to within farming, is that, as you would expect, while this report is possible, everything is on the optimistic side. So with a following wind, if everything was done for this report on 74 acres, it is potential that, and possible that, this would be a viable concern. But I do have some other questions. So it's been 3 years since this cabin was put up in open countryside with no planning permission. And in that time, no baby steps have been made towards the end game. So we're now talking, by the end of this, in 3 more years' time, 6 years will have passed since the so-called beginning of this business. And, okay, I've never been a farmer, but I wouldn't say that's a standard way to operate in business. It's a very strange way to operate, to let 3 years pass by before making a start. So I open it up to other councillors to give their thoughts on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Butterworth has indicated to speak. Councillor Butterworth, do you wish to speak?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Neil.
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon. I agree with Sarah. 3 years is a long time to try and start a business. Normally, anybody that's wants to start a business starts straight away. We as a council has been duped before with the Gables scenario, where the lady came and said she wanted to make it a nice family home and then turned it into 6 or 8 flats. So we have been duped before. And this log cabin, no, I'm against it totally. He's playing games with us. And 3 years to start a business, well, normally you start straight away. So I'm against this. Thank you.
Okay, if you could just put your hand down on your machine, that'd be great, Neil. Then I won't think you want to speak. Anybody else wish to speak before I ask Mr. Watson for any comments? Would you like to comment on anything that was said, Mr. Watson, before I ask for someone to put a resolution down?
Yes, if I may, please, Chairman, just briefly. I think what we would get from the appellant is that there's always been uncertainty about whether the applicant, he has been an appellant, Freudian slip, from the applicant, is that there has been a long time of uncertainty whether he will be able to live there and commence his enterprise. So I think that would be a comment we will get back that you can't carry out a business of that nature with the uncertainty of not being able to live there. And indeed, he hasn't been, as far as I'm aware, unless he's there now, he hasn't been there for substantial amounts of that time. So the argument will be, I've not been able to commence my business and have some uncertainty. Chairman, one thing we have done, and I recognise that there have been comments around the viability of this. We have had a report done by agricultural consultants we've engaged. We've also been through a hearing, and it's not a public inquiry, but an appeal, where, and I shared this with Councillor Coburn-Price, the appeal decision, which is public, and in that it said there was nothing before the inspector to say there was no potential functional need for a residence on there. Chairman, I would agree with Councillor Coburn-Price that as a permanent solution, this isn't a design that's appropriate in a conservation area. What this is there to do is to say, now's your chance. Can you make this enterprise go forward? And we will get a bite of the cherry as a council to say you have or you haven't done in 3 years' time. But in terms of trying to establish whether there is a bona fide, I think that's a phrase that was used before, bona fide need, we have gone through consultants and an inspector has looked at that. So I'd be wary of stepping back from that unless we have some evidence to suggest those processes were not robust and could be taken on board. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Foxley indicating to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask Mr. Watson, what was the timing of the report by the consultants? When was that done?
Chairman, I haven't. It's about 18 months ago, but it has been resubmitted now as part of this application as well. So we have an up-to-date statement from the applicant.
Sorry, no, I meant the report that you said that the council had done, the agricultural case.
On the order of 18 months ago, Chairman. Sorry, I haven't got an exact date for you.
Okay, Councillor Butterworth. Councillor Butterworth, Neil, you wish to speak? You need to click your mute button. You're muted.
No, I'm sorry. I'll go back to normal.
Okay, finger trouble. That's no problem. Okay, so if nobody has, does anybody wish to put a proposal on the table? If not, I'll put one from the chair.
I propose that we reject this application because, in fact, the applicant lives in Briarfield. He could buy a village house a mile away from the farm and make a start. And so I feel that this application should be rejected.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that?
Mr. Chairman, I will second that.
Okay, so I have a proposal and a second. I'll ask Mr. Watson to comment on what he would consider the way forward if that were the committee's final decision.
Chairman, were that to be the committee's final decision, I think because we have gone through a process and particularly with an appeal and an inspector commenting on this, I think there will be a realistic prospect of cost being awarded against us for being unreasonable, that having been partly tested on appeal, and therefore, Chairman, my view would have to be referred to policy and resources on that basis.
Okay. Okay, so we have a proposal on the table. Does anyone wish to put down an amendment to pass it? No? Okay, so we go back to the substantive motion that has been seconded. All those in favour of rejecting this application, please indicate.
Put your hand up because we need to.
Yeah. Okay, that's looking like everybody to me. So I'm going to assume everybody has voted for that. If you have not, if you've abstained or you are against, please indicate to me now that you are. I had nobody indicating to me, so that is unanimously rejected. Is everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you. Moving on, so that goes to policy and resources, kicked into somebody else's long grass. Next up, 0286. This is Windermere Avenue. I've got Mr. Ian Gilbert. Are you online, Mr. Gilbert?
Yes, Chair.
I understand you wish to speak. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. My name is Ian Gilbert, I work for Barton Wilmore, and we are the planning agents for McDermott Homes, who purchased the development site in question after it was granted planning permission at appeal for 90 dwellings back in 2016. We did act for the previous owner at the appeal, but they're a separate entity to the applicants before you today. Just like to welcome your officer's comprehensive report and their recommendation for approval of this application. Clearly the key issue for the report is whether or not the council can or should require the applicant to refurbish a pump house which sits outside of the applicant's site and ownership. Officer set out in their report that the refurbishment of the pump house is not deemed necessary to make the applicant's scheme acceptable in planning terms, and also does not belong to the applicant, making enforcement difficult. With regard to the tests for planning obligations, we consider that it's clear the refurbishment of the pump house should not be a requirement of the scheme. We've read the submissions to the application, and we understand the frustrations of the community that have made clear that they did not support the development here in the first place, but saw the refurbishment of the pump house as sweetening an otherwise bitter pill to swallow, which is now perceived as being withdrawn. We do understand that position, but it is not the case here. At the time of the appeal, not my clients here, but the appellants offered the refurbishment of the pump house only if it was considered necessary to mitigate harm to the surrounding heritage assets, and invited the inspectors to consider whether or not that was necessary. And there's a severance clause in the section 106 that reflects that, otherwise known as a blue pen clause. The inspector confirmed that no such obligation was necessary in granting planning permission, and as such, we considered the provision of the pump house works have fallen away from within the section 106, but they still remain in a condition. Accordingly, the pump house was not purchased with the site, nor were the refurbishment works included within the proposals expected to be delivered by McDermott Homes as far as McDermott Homes saw. We therefore respectfully request that the committee follow their officer's recommendation in approving this application. Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. I would ask Mr. Watson just to comment on that before we get into the discussions.
Chairman, if I may, I will share something with committee. Hopefully this has come up on screen. Chairman, this is, can people see that? Yes. Yeah,
I can. Yeah.
Chairman, this is the basis of this from the planning inspector's report. Paragraph 92, the inspector looks at other forms of contribution, highways, bus services, etc., and indicates that I find that they are necessary to make the development acceptable. Chairman, you then go on to paragraph 93 of the inspector's report and his decision, not his report, his decision. The restoration of the pump house has not been specifically sought, nor does it result from harm arising from the development itself. Chairman, that is critical to this, to require either a condition or to require a section 106 agreement. There are tests that the requirements have to fulfill, and that is a necessity test. It must be necessary for this condition to be imposed to make that development acceptable. Chairman, I could understand, and I would fully understand, a community thinking that the goalposts have been shifted. I don't fully agree with Mr. Gilbert on this. The Section 106 agreement was in place, a unilateral undertaking. They have to take that on board in their dealings. So I do not agree with that. What I however, do agree with is that the inspector has made it quite clear that there is no direct link between the two. So requiring a developer to do something in those circumstances will not pass those tests. And Chairman, although it might stick in the community's gut, and I understand that, we are charged with administering the lawful process of an Act of Parliament and the subsidiary legislation, which is a community infrastructure levy regulations, which put into law the necessity test for Section 106 agreements. Chairman, it will be an extremely difficult leap now to say that the refurbishment is necessary when you've got a very, very clear statement from a planning inspector that it is not. And Chairman, it would approve refusing this and requiring them to keep that in would, in my view, lead us into an inquiry, and we will be up the creek without a paddle, I'm afraid, in planning law terms. So, Chairman, I don't think we've any option but to recommend that this is accepted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Watson. So, who would like to start? Does anyone have a proposal?
Chair, can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
I'm down to 4% battery, so I may disappear. I've got it plugged in now, but I don't think that's going to help. I started off with 79. It absolutely drains this iPad. So if I go, I go.
Okay, would you like to indicate how you would like to vote, Scott, or not?
Well, I think I'll go with Neil, with what Neil said. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that into account if you're not here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Anybody else? Councillor Coburn-Price.
And listen carefully to what Neil said. And of course, I don't in any way dispute it. But I was there at the appeal, as was he, as was Catherine Hughes. And I heard the Barton Wilmore team offering this. And I heard it being repeatedly mentioned through the 6-day appeal about how ideal it would be if this heritage asset of the pump house was restored within the conservation area. Because let's be clear, this development on the Lower Rough is some harm. You know, it was mitigated. They said it wasn't severe, but it is harm to the conservation area. And this was repeatedly held up as a little sweetener for the local community. And Lidget and Beyond were not wrong when they said that it was a unilateral understanding. This is about corporate responsibility. This pump house has been a centre for antisocial behaviour for a really long time. It's actually dangerous. You know, if this council cannot compel the people who bought the land from the people who got the planning permission, so they must have done their corporate due diligence to do this work as a sign of good faith, then I really do feel that the council should be putting an S106 on the owners, who I might point out are the original owners of the whole rough. So they are the people that sought it, they are the people that offered it, they had Barton Wilmore as their advisors, and now we hear that the developers bought the land. So you buy a land, whether it's got giant hogweed on it, whether it's got any kind of peril, you know what you are going in for. You do your due diligence. And the reason that it's come up now and not come up at the detailed planning is because the clause states it must be continued, it must be finished before the first house is occupied. So now they're romping through the site and they want to avoid this work. I don't know whether all the councillors know the building we're talking about. It is a modest little stone building. It's only one floor. It needs some new slates. It needs perhaps a bit of pointing. It needs a new door. We are not talking about like a free house or anything like that. We are talking about something for the community. And I might point out as well that because of LCC, the developers for the Lower Rough are paying not one penny piece towards the educational provision that nearly all other developers would be paying. So this is a pittance, and the local residents have suffered from flooding, they've suffered from endless diggings up of pavements and all kinds of awful mud and disruption. I really do feel that this is absolutely outrageous that this would even be raised.
Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Foxley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, like Councillor Coburn-Price, I accept the legal arguments about whether the developer can be compelled to do this. I find it, if I said disappointing, that would be a huge understatement. I think it's somewhat disingenuous of the developers and or Barton Wilmore to turn around at this stage and try and wriggle out of what they clearly offered as a sweetener for this development. And as Sarah has said, it's more a case of them having some respect and some consideration of their corporate social responsibilities. And this, I would have thought, is such a minor thing from the developer's point of view in the scheme of things with such a sizable development, that to just unilaterally try and wriggle out of this, I think is pretty poor, frankly. But as I say, I have no doubt in my mind at all that we have no means of compelling them to do so. And I think that is shameful. I think there's a difference here. I just want to clarify, because Councillor Coburn-Price has just said that I think she said that the developers bought the land, bought the pump house. But I think the representative from Barton Wilmore has said that they didn't purchase it from the landowners, from their original clients. So I would like that point just clarifying, please.
I can clarify that for you. Sorry, I obviously wasn't clear. The owners of the whole rough sought the planning permission.
Yeah.
The owners of the whole rough now only own the upper rough, and they sold the lower rough to McDermott's. So McDermott's knew what they were getting in for when they bought that land from the owners of the whole rough.
But I understood from the comment earlier that they didn't buy the pump house.
They did not buy the pump house because
Yes.
the pump house is on the upper.
It's on the upper rough.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you finished, Councillor Foxley, or do you have any further?
I have. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else wish to speak? Well, this is down for approval. I'll call Mr. Watson. Yeah, sorry, who was that? Councillor Butterworth. Yeah, go ahead, Neil. You have to switch your mute off. Switch your mic on.
Are we there?
Yeah, got you now.
Can we bring the representative back into this this conversation? Because I agree with both councillors. For the amount of money that it will cost to do that as a favour, as a sweetener, as a goodwill gesture, it won't cost a fortune, and it would make people a little bit happier. He did say it was a bitter pill to swallow. Then why, for the amount of money that it will cost, can't he be lenient and just say, you know, we'll fix it for you? It's a simple thing to do, very low cost, and a goodwill gesture. Can I ask him to respond to this, please?
Okay, I'll ask Mr. Watson to comment first, and then I'll give Mr. Gilbert the opportunity of saying something. Mr. Watson.
All I would say, Chairman, is two things, two separate but linked issues. I suggest you make your decision based on the planning merits of this, and then I think speak to Mr. Gilbert then about whether the developer will be willing to do this as a matter of goodwill, even if it's to provide finance. But we're getting to really difficult legal territories if we start to try and link the two, which I think we need to be clear on what we're asking for and why, and the decisions that we're making.
Yeah. I mean, just for sitting and listening to what you've said, I think as Mr. Watson has said, and from what you said to me before the meeting, Mr. Watson, we've got to be careful. We're asking something that is like, we don't have to demand this. So we're asking something to give us because there is no connection. Is that correct, Mr. Watson, what I've just said?
You broke up a little bit there, but from what I understood, it was whether there's a compunction to do something as opposed to whether there's a discussion. If that's what I got, then yes, there's a clear legal distinction, Chairman. Yes. Okay.
Councillor Foxley, would you like to speak?
Yes, I just wanted to say that, and Mr. Watson has just basically covered that, but I was going to say that obviously, just as with a planning consent, there's no requirement on the applicant to undertake the development. Just because we, I'm sure, will, I shall certainly vote for approving this application to amend the conditions. Just because that condition is amended doesn't mean that the applicant couldn't go ahead and arrange for the refurbishment by whatever means of that building. And I think that is something that I am strongly requesting that they give very serious consideration to.
Yeah, okay, that's understood.
Totally separate from the planning matter, obviously.
Okay. Lynn, you wish to speak?
Yeah, I just want to indicate that Councillor Dorothy Lord has indicated that she wants to speak.
Oh, right. Sorry, I missed that. Okay, Councillor Lord. Switch your mic on.
Yeah, I've done it. Chair, I think I probably panicked a bit and jumped the gun by agreeing to what Mr. Watson was saying, but having heard Councillor Foxy and Councillor Corbyn-Price speaking, I probably understand a bit more now, and so if I do go, I will vote with what they're saying. Yeah,
I think we're getting very close to that. Mr. Watson's shaking his head, but I think you might.
Chairman, we've got an applicant here who's not averse to judicially reviewing. You've got to have a motion to say first what you're going to vote on before you can say how you're going to vote. So, Chairman, just be clear on that, please.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Corbyn-Price hand up, and then if we don't get a proposal, I'll put one on the table. Mike, Sarah.
Sorry. This is a question for Mr. Watson. Really, I suppose if we broke this down, the people who did the agreement, although their agents were Barton Wilmore, the people who did the agreement were the landowners, and the people who bought into it were the developers. But the landowners have made a fortune. So really, in a way, you could say they were the people that did the agreement, and they are the people who should repair the pump house. Now, the pump house is in a parlous state. I wonder whether Mr. Watson would raise a restoration order, it's in a conservation area, and get this building repaired once and for all to stop the antisocial behaviour and the danger.
Sounds like someone's hoovering there. I don't know whether...
No, I've got workmen creating a stable next door. I'm terribly excited.
Chairman, I think that's the second element to this. Dispose of the application, and then if there is another matter of enforcement for that, then raise that, I think, as a separate item. Ruinous, dilapidated under Section 79 of the Building Act, Section 215. There are ways we can deal with this.
But I think then the way forward, Mr. Watson, as you said, is we'll park that for the time being. We still hopefully have got Mr. Gilbert there who we can have a chat with after we've done this. So I'm from the chair going to propose approval for this application, but I put this on the table for approval. I would ask somebody to second it. Is someone prepared to second the application?
I'll second that, Chair.
Okay, we have a motion on the, do I have anybody wish to amend that motion? No. So we have a motion on the table that has been seconded. All those in favour of passing this application as seconded? Okay. I believe nobody voted against. Is that correct? Please indicate now if you wish to abstain or vote against. Councillor Butterworth, you've got your hand up. Is that okay, or do you wish to speak?
No,
Okay.
I don't need to speak. Okay.
Okay, so we're back to this application has now been approved unanimously. Is that correct?
May I speak? Neil, could you crack on with bringing the correct instruments for the building for its future?
Chairman, stemming from this, I would suggest that you give me some ammunition for this, planning ammunition, not literal, and make a resolution that appropriate action be taken under either Section 215 or Section 79 of the Building Act. This will be the motion to ensure the condition of the property is brought up to an acceptable standard.
Mr. Gilbert, are you still there?
Yes, Chair.
Oh, thank you. So I think you've got the gist of that.
Yeah, I do, Chair.
I think you can see that people are fairly upset by what has happened. If you could take that message back, that for probably very little money, somebody could buy themselves quite a lot of goodwill. Whether they choose to take that opportunity or not is probably a management decision, but I would like you to take that message back with you, and I think that is reasonable.
Any other? Take that.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to make any comments?
I think that Lidget and Beyond will most certainly be putting out a press release about this disgraceful application. So Barton Wilmore and McDermott's will know that it will that will happen unless they change their minds.
Okay, Councillor Mann.
I'm just wondering. We don't seem to have mentioned the reduction of affordable housing on the site from 10% to 5%. Is that something that I've misread?
Through you, Chairman. No, yes and no. We, as officers, made an error on that. The original unilateral undertaking agreed at the inquiry was 5%. That's always been 5%. We wrote 10% in the last report, inadvertently and incorrectly. So the 5% is as it has always been. So there's been no change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, happy with that. Okay, Mr. Gilbert, I'll give you the last word if you wish to have it. If not, thank you for attending.
No, Chair. I mean, I can see, and I do understand the frustrations of members, and I understand all the points that Councillors Coburn, Price, and Councillor Foxey have raised. In terms of the matter of due diligence and whether this is for McDermott to have sort of wriggled out of, as part of the purchase of the site, the solicitors that deal with the purchase would have looked at what the costs that came with the purchase of the development would have been. And it would have been the advice to McDermott that the refurbishment of the pump house was not part of the works that they needed to do, because it was the opinion of our side that those works fell away when the inspector deems them to be not necessary. So it isn't the case that I think they're trying to now wriggle out I think in terms of costs, the costs do look to be about £30,000 from what we can see. In terms of the ability of the McDermott can't do the works, but in terms of the ability of the landowner to offer those works as a matter of good faith and goodwill, that is something that I can speak to Neil separately on this. We are obviously still in contact with the landowners, but they are not my instructing party on this application at all. So I can't speak for them, Chair.
And I totally understand the position you're in. We hope if with a little bit of arm twisting that somebody somewhere might find some money and get this done. But we'll see where we go. Thank you very much. So if everybody's happy with that, then I'm going to ask Jerry now to come in. He sent a report round which I'll give everybody. So Jerry, it's all yours. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you all the councillors for allowing me to come forward on the committee meeting. I have a council of governors at Airedale Hospital immediately following this meeting. Just to keep this brief, can I take it as read, the report that has been circulated on my behalf, and just make a few additional comments and then open to questions or whatever. I want to stress that in no way do I criticise.
Sorry, interrupting you. Could I just ask you to give us 5 or 6 bullet points for members of the public that might be listening to this being live stream? Sorry. I'll stop this. Yeah, if I could just ask you to give 5 or 6 bullet points, the main concerns you have in that, in your report, so everybody knows what you're talking about.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I understand that. This goes back to December 2018 when Chief Superintendent Matt Horn was invited to Pendle Borough Council's Community Safety Partnership to explain the new system of neighbourhood policing which they were introducing, which meant a big reduction in the number of neighbourhood police team, but an increase in the rapid response teams, which were sitting in the office ready to leap in a car and go wherever they had to go. We were assured by Chief Superintendent Horn that this system would be much more efficient and that the rapid response team would be rushing around helping the neighbourhood team, even though they didn't know the area and didn't know the individuals, and we wouldn't see any different. It's in that background that I present this report. Over the last month, we have seen a procession of lawless behaviour rushing across the social media. We've had drug dens discovered. We've had partying overnight in North Street. And this has been going on time and time again. It's not just a one-off occasion. We've had regular drug problems coming up at the various working group meetings that I've held, and pavement slabs are being stolen right across the Colne area. The Pendle crime figures up to March show that Pendle's crime against the person is twice as high as the next rated category, acquisitive crime. And interestingly, domestic abuse was actually lower than usual, in spite of all the national press figures saying that the lockdown would make domestic abuse worse. ASB, however, has increased significantly within Pendle. We were 6th out of 14 community safety partnerships in Lancashire. The increase was largely attributed to neighbours complaining about infringements of the lockdown in the way of illegal parties. Waterside, Horsefield and Vivery Bridge were 2nd, 4th and 6th in Pendle. Youth ASB was less marked, although of course the party scene is predictably young people. The Colne crime figures for May were up on the previous year by 150%. And in June, they were up on the June 2019 figures by 84%. That gives you a measure of the ASB that we're experiencing. The neighbourhood police presence is a serious problem because, good as they are, they have to also man the ASB car, and they have to do vehicle check duties, taking them away from their job as neighbourhood policemen. Rest days, training days and annual leave also go on. So the 2 PCs and the 3 PCSOs that we have are being taken away from the public face. This leaves long periods when there's no officer on duty, although there is sometimes cover from the Craven team. We have an excellent neighbourhood police team, well supported by Tim Horsley from Pendle Borough and by information fed from our CSP working party. But the numbers of them are insufficient with their current workload to achieve the information gathering and the deterrence from crime that the area needs. I'm afraid Chief Superintendent Horn's forecast 2 years ago was wrong. And I'm recommending that the council should press the government to introduce laws to require parents to take shared legal responsibility for their offspring until they reach the age of maturity. That's legal responsibility. That the Police and Crime Commissioner should be pressed to ensure that the much flaunted increase in police numbers be used to increase the neighbourhood policing teams, and that ASB car manning and vehicle check duties should be drawn from the rapid response teams and not from the neighbourhood teams. So that's in essence what I'm saying. We have had a huge amount of crime. I have detailed some of it in the report. We have initiatives from the police. We've got Lancashire Talking, which is being used at the moment. And anyone who wants to know more about that, if you Google Lancashire Talking, you will find it. One final point for councillors is that Colne Town Council, and I know some of you represent that as well as the Borough Council, are being asked to confirm whether they wish the always forget the name of them, the designated public place order be reintroduced for Colne. This is where they prevent alcohol being consumed in public. We in the working group would strongly recommend that this is continued. It has been very, very well policed, and we would want it to continue. And can I finally say, in no way do I criticise our neighbourhood police team. They are excellent and they help the community far beyond what their hours require of them. Can I thank you for that, councillors? Over to you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Lord indicated she wishes to. Councillor Lord. Councillor Lord, do you wish to speak? Do you wish to speak, Dot?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. Yeah, I had to report an incident a couple of weeks ago, and it made me think about what the call handlers maybe are now being told to accept as, you know, whatever, whether they send people out because of what she actually said to me. At the back of me, there's a house with about 3 children, and they have a trampoline in the backyard, which is fine. They bounce on this trampoline all summer long, and that's great. It doesn't bother me. But at 4:30, one Friday morning, those children were playing on that trampoline, and they were also climbing on the kitchen roof and jumping off there onto the trampoline. We witnessed this from the back bedroom window. So I rang the police, and she said, oh, we wouldn't come out for something like that, you know, which alarmed me. And I said, I've already told you there are children involved here, and it's 4:30 in the morning, you know. All right, then we'll send somebody. That really bothered me. And so it makes me think about, is there a change in what the call handlers are prioritising amongst this lockdown? You know, I don't know. It's just my thought on it. Thank you. Whoever's talking is breaking up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can
Sarah?
hear you.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I agree with Dorothy, actually, because a resident near me rang the police for people taking drugs and having a mini rave, and would you believe, throwing dead animals into the road. And they phoned the police, expecting the police to care. But I'm not saying the police didn't care. As you say, Dorothy, it was the handler has repeatedly rebuffed these residents who've been reporting this and said, oh, it's a civil matter, it's private land. But it's illegal activity on private land. I would say the trespass is the least of it. So perhaps that's an issue as well. But coming back to everything that Jerry's been saying, oh, I might add, I've written to the inspector so much during lockdown because residents have written to me. He actually wrote to me and asked me to stop writing to him. But all of Jerry's points, I think, are totally pertinent. And if we as a committee could support him, either by including Andrew Stevenson, writing to the police crime commissioner, we absolutely need to do it. And another thing that I was told was happening when the inspector wrote back to me saying, please don't write to me anymore, you're writing to me nearly every day. He said, don't worry, because on July the 1st, there's going to be a new app launched, and it'll be revolutionary because you could be able to report crimes really, really easily from your mobile phone. And we're going to launch this app, and it will set the local people, it will set their priorities, and it will be superb. And there's been no sign of this app. You can only report things via the website, just as you always could, and that already puts it low down the priority. This much vaunted app for July the 1st, where is it? Is it coming? I don't know. But I would like to support Jerry, all of Jerry's outcomes, and I would like additionally to add from Dorothy and also my residents' experience, which is what are these call handlers being told in terms of antisocial behaviour? Because that's what bothers and frightens local residents. If they just feel that nobody cares, then it's that they start to feel the lack of faith in our, as Jerry says, excellent police.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Just before we go on, I don't know whether anybody else has had technical issues then. I lost all of you and then one came back, so Margaret has indicated. So I think it's possibly a central problem rather than an individual problem. So just bear with if it freezes up. But I didn't lose your voice the whole time there, Sarah. So I've got Councillor Foxty and then Councillor Butterworth. So Paul, you're on.
No, it's Margaret, actually. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, and certainly Dot and Sarah, and also, of course, Jerry's report, which is really needed. We need to say something about this, but I just feel that we're being very, very kind to the police officers. I don't think we're shouting enough about the service we're not receiving. To be honest, I think people are losing faith fast in the police. The way I've not seen any police officers during lockdown. Where are they? Where are these community police officers? I'd really like to know where they've all been hiding. They're not responding to complaints and issues about speeding traffic. I don't take my grandchildren anywhere near the road in Lanesford Bridge now because it's just absolutely like a racetrack. And Sarah's absolutely right. She's hounded the police with letters of concern, and we're just getting nowhere. And it's all well and good saying we have great community police officers, and we do, but they're not really doing the job they should be doing as far as I see it. And I think it needs to be said. We can be as kind as we like to them, but where have they been the last 8 weeks?
Okay. Just about a word. Neil?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
All right, thank you very much. I'd just like to return to my long, I don't know, past drugs in Colne. Now, I have indicated 3 main points in Colne that I know of where drugs are being taken. And you know, as chairman, I've been at this for years, not months, years. And the 3 same points are being used on a regular basis. It is like an Asda behind the library. It's like an Asda under the archway across from the pub. It is an Asda and Morrison's and Lidl all put together in the graveyard. The other day I went to visit my friend who I buried 2 weeks ago, and there was 8 people there. They were taking drugs intravenously. There was smoking dope. They was having a good party. The music was on. It is horrendous. And I did phone up the place, and they handle them again exactly the same as the others. She seemed more interested in fobbing me off with we're very busy. There's very few officers out at the moment. At the end of the day, after 3, 4, 5 years of telling people where these drugs are happening and being taken and being sold, and yet they're not monitored. And so my big question, I'd like Jerry to ask the main people is, if you know where they're being taken, if you know where they're being sold, why aren't you doing something about it? And they're there on most days, even rainy days, because it's an archway and they go in there. Thank you very much.
Absolutely right, Neil.
Okay. Councillor Lord, you wanted to come back? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's interesting what Neil has said. And only yesterday, my grandson drew my attention to something that we thought was a drugs transaction on Knowsley Street, which is just off Earl Street. And this has been going on for quite some time on a regular basis. Residents have reported it to me. I sent a big long email to our community beat officer, who said last week it's a lot to process, is this, and I haven't heard anything since. Now we actually witnessed a package being passed over to a guy that was stood there from a car. This is happening all the time. I took a photograph and managed to get the guy that was either passing it over or receiving it. I couldn't really see that much, but when I zoomed in onto the photograph, it's a very good picture of him, and so I'm going to send that to the police. But and I totally agree with what Margaret said. We are not saying what we really think, and we should be. You know, we're not here to not hurt their feelings, or, you know, be kind to them or whatever. They're our police force, and they should be. Something has gone really badly wrong in this last couple of years. Margaret's right. You don't see anybody. I mean, one policeman I was dealing with, I couldn't understand this, but I thought, well, it's not my place to. 3 weeks ago, he was on holiday. When I sent him an email, the email came back, I'm on holiday. I think it was like 10 days. A week later, he's on another holiday. I am off on holiday now for 7 days. What's going on there? That's the person that you want to get hold of, and for like 3 weeks out of a month, he's had 2 separate periods of leave. So that was one thing that got to me, really. I thought, what the hell's going on here? You know, they do a good job. We always say that they do a good job, but the job isn't being done anymore. It isn't being done. The amount of information that they get, like Neil says, they get all this information from members of the public, from people like us, and are they acting on it? I have no idea.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
So, thanks, Scott. So I'll try and pull this together a little bit. So I'm getting the feeling that we're fairly unhappy with the situation with the police in the area we're responsible for. We want to write to the Police and Crime Commissioner. I think we'll use Jerry's report as the basis for this letter. That can be sent along with it. I would suggest the Chief Constable and the MP. Anybody else you think should be copied in on that? Should we go for those 3 then, Lynn, if we can? So we would like Jerry's report attached to that. And I think you've heard the general feelings of what's been said. Rather than repeat it all to you now, can I ask for you to sort of condense that into something, and I'll okay it with you? But
yes,
certainly I think to mention that long term, we've pointed out 3 drug taking and dealing areas that are still there, are still being used, and nothing is being done. What are we paying the police for? And let's see what happens. I will ask Lynn to circulate it round to everybody. Councillor Thomas, you wish to speak?
I was wondering whether it would be good if Colne Town Council also sent a letter saying we're dissatisfied with the service, and I can get it on the next agenda. So I'll do that if the Colne area councillors think that might be okay to do, to back up what you're saying as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I did think of maybe getting the full council involved somewhere along the line for Pendle, but then it tends to get watered down a bit, and then politics can sometimes it'll lose its sting in it, if you know what I mean. So I think it's probably best, if you agree, that we keep it from this committee for this area. This is the place we're primarily responsible for. If you're happy with that. Okay, Lynn, if we can do that then, and we'll try and agree some words. But if I could say, I think people are feeling fairly let down, and I would like our letter to reflect that, if that's okay. Is anybody from the police listening to this now, or have they gone?
I can't see them in the attendance at the moment.
Okay. If there's no more, then I'd go start on item 7, which is enforcements. Are you happy with that? Jerry?
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I tried to get in there before you went on to the next item.
Sure, yeah.
Just to say, it's pretty poor that they're not here.
Yeah, you can add that to the list as well. It doesn't take a lot of effort for someone to onto a computer, to be honest. I can understand them not being able to come to a meeting at 7 o'clock on a Thursday night. But anyone that's at a desk in a police station anywhere in the country can join this meeting, and they know that we'll work the agendas round them. If they give me a time slot of 20 minutes at any time this afternoon, I'd have fitted them in. So, they don't have an excuse, I don't think. Okay, Doc. Jerry, you want the last word before we go?
Just to ask if Chief Inspector Andy Cartwright could be included in the circulation, because
Sure.
he has responsibility for Pendle and Ribblesdale.
Okay with that, Lynn? Yeah, I've got a nod there. Yeah, we'll put her on the circulation. Okay.
Thank you very much indeed for your support.
Thank you for the time and effort you put into these matters, Jerry. I hope it's fruitful for everybody.
Thank you very much.
Okay, enjoy your Airedale Hospital meeting.
I will.
Okay, moving on then. Enforcement and unauthorised uses. Anybody, any comments? No? Moving on. David, you wish to speak?
Yes, Chairman. At the top of page 2, item 3, it's almost 3 months ago now since the date to comply expired. Can I just ask Neil? I know there's situations slightly different with the corona thing messing everything up, but now this has expired by 3 months for the date to comply, where does it go now?
Through you, Chairman, it would go to court. Currently, if I have my numbers right, there's about 48 or 49 court actions that we're waiting to take forward, and the courts aren't dealing with them at the moment, so there is a backlog throughout the whole system, I'm afraid.
Okay, happy with that? Well, you have an explanation. Whether you're happy or not is a different question, but yeah. Okay, thank you. So if you're happy with that, we'll move on. Capital programme. So I don't think there's anything to say. I'll just give you a heads up. So I think I'm the only councillor on the committee that has no money left. So do bear that in mind with this being the last year in the cycle. So you like to, I'm sure there's plenty of projects, particularly with what's happening in your wards. So start to think about it, because it's quite difficult with capital. And the other thing is we have kept the pot that we've had for this year. I was thinking maybe with the money to be spent in Colne, towards reopening and all that sort of thing. But if that money is not spent by the time we sort of approach Christmas, then I would be suggesting to you that maybe we rehash what we've done in previous years and make an allocation to each ward for money to be spent there. Again, looking to use that money this year before it ends in May 21. So I just thought I'd share that with you, if that's okay. Any other comments anybody wish to make? Okay, so then item 9, the land frontings, number 6 and 22 Patton Street. I've had a long chat with Tony, who was hoping to attend today. What he wanted was some more time to discuss this with the residents, and he thought maybe a month. I suggested 2 months. So what I'm going to suggest to the committee is that we put this off for 2 months, which would then give the ward councillors an opportunity to get the residents together so that they can get some sort of organisation rather than act individually. And it is likely that they possibly will need a change of use planning permission for this to come forward. Has anybody any comments there?
Chairman, I did have a message from Councillor Mann, who has actually dropped off the call, and she was saying the same thing, just asking that the item be deferred so that they have a chance to speak with the residents.
That's absolutely fine. As I say, Councillor Greaves had initially said to me, we'll deal with it next month. I said, well, let's put it off for 2 months and get it organised rather than it be another bodge and then running out of time, because the way things are at the moment, it's quite difficult to organise meetings and get decisions done, isn't it? So we'll do that. I did discuss it with Mr. Watson. I don't think there's any urgency with this. I don't think there's any time constraint. So, people can take their time and do it right, no reason not. Happy with all that? Okay, so the next one is item 10, reopening Pendle Town Centres. So we had some information from the bid and what they propose to do. I've had that looked at by the officers of the council, and the indications are there's at least £5,000 worth of spending in there that meets the criteria. So nobody said to me what they're suggesting cannot be funded. So what I've been trying to do from the beginning is to get the money there and get it spent, rather than spend weeks talking about it, by which time we will have missed the opportunity, because the money is needed now, I would imagine, rather than in 6 weeks' time. So that's where we are with that. Is anyone any comments? Councillor Coburn-Price.
I think that we need to, as a matter of urgency, set up our first working group with at least Mary representing the town council, possibly yourself, and the bid, perhaps other interested parties, so that we move beyond the initial, which is all to do with sort of hand gel, and we're now talking about refreshing the stickers from the original stickers because it's often looked at. So those initial small things, moving on to those bigger items, I think we need to get that date in the diary as soon as we can.
I absolutely agree. You've got to move quickly, you know, if it's going to have any effect. Councillor Lord.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah.
Can we include Colne Market Manager in this? They've worked really hard in the market, and they've been doing, getting things ready for weeks, and so I don't know, people might learn something from them. And I think it'd be nice for them to be included as well.
Absolutely, yeah. No problem at all. I mean, my only involvement was to just see that the money is being used as the government laid out. I don't want to get involved in arguing about how it is spent or where it's spent. That's not my partnership at all. I don't understand a lot about it. So somebody else can do that. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? No. So Colne Town Centre premises grant. Oh, sorry, I've missed you. You're behind my bar. Councillor.
No, I would just want to agree with Sarah that we need some urgency now on this, and things will move quickly and we need to get it done. So get some dates.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. That's cracking. Okay, we are done now. Yeah. Okay. Colne Town Centre premises improvement grant. I think that was really for information. I don't know if anybody has any comments.
Dorothy, Margaret and I know that another application has been filled in for the 2 premises in Dockeray Street that are owned by Pendle Borough Council. So it's a bit of a win for Pendle Borough Council in that it owns the building and it's spending money on its own building potentially, if it is agreed. So we do have, since the report was written, an application to improve the frontages of 2 shops on the table.
Okay. Yeah. Internal market, I think it's called, Sarah, isn't it? Okay. So item 12 we've already dealt with. Item 13 is environmental blight. Any comments, issues? And then item 14 is outstanding items. Just something to look forward to for the next meeting. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for all of you for attending. Have a good month, and I'll see you in 4 weeks' time.
Mr. Chairman, well done, well done.